Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream session with immigrationquestion.com. We are glad to have you join us on today's series. Before we get into the business of today, let's examine a real life example of a young Mexican woman, Rosie. She has spent years in the US, quietly building her life, abiding by all of the immigration rules, and working towards her life that she has always dreamt of in the country she loves so much. All of a sudden, everything changes, and life as she knows it has been marred by uncertainty. Sad as this may sound, it is the reality of many immigrants. Immigration policies are constantly changing, and the recent executive orders have once again reshaped the landscape. But what do these changes really mean for you and your loved ones? Today, we continue our session from last week, Understanding the Impact of Recent Executive Orders on Immigration, Part 2. This topic simplifies these recent executive orders, detailing the impacts it has on the current immigration landscape and all immigrants. My name is Chanel Ford, joining you live from New York, and I'll be your host for this session. Today, we're thrilled to have a returning guest with us. He's been practicing immigration law since the 1980s and has dedicated his career to advocating for immigrants' rights. He's taught immigration law at esteemed institutions, including the University of New Mexico and Texas Tech University, and has even served as a U.S. immigration judge. His wealth of experience makes him the right person and the professional to help us break down these complex changes. Welcome with me, Attorney John Lawit. Welcome, Attorney Lawit. How are you today?
Very good, Chanel.
Great. Happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. To our audience watching on various platforms, it's about to get exciting. Grab your pens and pencils and let's jump right in. Attorney Lawit, can you give us an overview of the recent executive orders? What key changes should we be aware of?
Well, yes, I can give you some idea about the executive orders, but they come like rain, and it takes time to sort things out. But some of the ones that have been somewhat sorted out are, first of all, the cancellation of the refugee resettlement program. The United States had signed a 1980s protocol allowing for the non-refoulement of people that apply for political asylum and come to the United States. But Mr. Trump has completely canceled the program. Even if a family member has made it into the United States in refugee status, the remaining family members no longer can come to the United States. That was already, and the people that are in line for refugee resettlement have been vetted for years. They're the most vetted people there are. And so this has affected 15,000 people from Afghanistan, people from Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, totaling about 500,000 people, are all now in limbo. He has promised to round up and deport millions of unauthorized immigrants. But thus far, and he said that he was going to focus on criminal aliens. And of course, if there is a part of this where people can get behind what he's doing, it would be removing dangerous people from our midst. But that takes actual work and actual detective work. And so instead, even though he said that he was only going to focus on the people with the criminal orders, less than half of the 8,200 people that have been arrested from January 20th to February 2nd have any criminal convictions at all. So and he's constantly pressuring DHS to arrest more and more people, because even though he's doing this with a great deal of fanfare, he's not even keeping up with the Biden's level. And Biden didn't have any programs like this. Another thing that's happened, aside from that, is that he is trying to do away with birthright citizenship. So if you're here on a student visa completely legally, and you have a baby, under the new rule that he's proposing, the baby would not be a U.S. citizen. And so he wants to change the naturalization rules, but to do that, he not only will have to go to court, he probably would go to Congress, where he doesn't have a chance of getting anything passed. And then from there, it would go to the Supreme Court. And it's written right into the Constitution of the United States that there shall be naturalization in this country. And so he doesn't care anymore. And so he's just going to do what he wants to do. There's several other orders that are in play now, particularly for Venezuelan TPS. As things stand now, there are two Venezuelan TPS rules, one from 2021 and one from 2023. They are both in effect, but they've both been canceled at the same time. And from this point forward, Venezuelans cannot reapply for TPS re-registration applications based on the notice that he published on January 17th. And this is a really big change. In the past, if there was a program that came to an end and there was people in line who had already paid their fees and were waiting for a decision, those folks would be allowed to proceed forward under the old rules. And then when all the people had gotten through, then the new rules take effect. He's not doing that anymore. What he's done is, if you have filed for a TPS re-registration or an extension, instead of adjudicating it, they're going to return your fees, which means that, and then if you've got an extension or an EAD, they're canceled now, and they're going to refund the money for those. And what the president says, well, everybody could then file for a political asylum. Well, that's not true. Once you're in the United States for more than a year, it's almost impossible to get political asylum. There's a specific provision to bar people, except under very limited circumstances, who wait more than a year after entering the United States to apply for asylum. So all these folks who have been here for years, based on this one ruling, will be ineligible for asylum, and the chances are very, very good that as soon as they get into court, they're going to get final orders of removal. And so with the return of fees rather than adjudicating applications, even if you file for something now, you don't know if it's ever going to go through, because he could just decide, oh, I don't like it today, and I'm going to return your fees, and you're on your own. Let's see. The other thing he's done, of course, is made it much, much easier for ICE agents to go into schools, churches, places of assembly, courts, police departments, to arrest people that are here in undocumented status. And the biggest group pushing back against this are law enforcement officers. Law enforcement officers who are dedicated to doing their jobs in their particular city or their particular state. They didn't hire on to become immigration enforcers. And the enforcement of immigration laws is very complex, and you've got to know what you're doing. And from the police's point of view, they're trying to build bridges to the immigrant community so that they can have a somewhat normal society with people willing to come to the police and when they have problems and not fear being arrested. He's trying to end all of that. And he's trying to make the local police into the enforcers of first choice. And they're the reason it didn't happen before. And I think that if this falls apart, it'll be because the police refuse again, because they don't have the training. He's not offering them any funding. He's just saying, you're now going to do this extra work for me. So that's where he's going with that. Another very, very important thing that change that has come about is he made a executive order on January 20th and protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats. And what this particular executive order is going after is they're using the need to vet the people coming to the U.S. as an excuse to keep them from coming. And what happens is when you go to a consulate and you apply for a visa, they already have a very robust vetting program. So please understand that this vetting that he's talking about is vetting that's already being done anyway. But what it will do, because he's using language like that, all aliens must be thoroughly vetted. There can't be any question about anything about them at all. And so as a result of this changing in the vetting, it will make cases go twice as long as they normally should go. He can't repeal the Immigration Nationality Act because he doesn't have the votes. So what he's trying to do, he's trying to use executive actions to eviscerate the Immigration Nationality Act so it only serves his particular political self-interest. And there's no, they say, for example, in the language, it says that the State Department must vet and screen to the maximum degree possible all aliens who intend to be admitted, enter, or are already inside the United States, particularly those aliens coming from regions or nations with identified security risks, without defining it, what that means. So this includes people that are already here in status, that he's allowed to come and vet that person, that is, take them into custody and make them prove that they're loyal to America or loyal to the laws of America. He also then wants to identify countries around the world that won't participate in this vetting program so that he can punish them because they're flooding the United States with dangerous terrorists. There's no evidence of that at all, by the way, none at all.
Oh my goodness.
People from other countries are just like the people from this country. Some are very good and some are very bad. And he's right to try to catch the ones that are very bad. But the problem is he tends to cast the net so big, it'll catch the bad people for sure, but it's also going to ensnare thousands of people who have done nothing but obey the law. And that's his intention. Now, I could go on and on with these changes, but the bottom line is that there's a strategy behind this.
Right.
If he gets enough chaos introduced into the system, nobody will know what to do. And that's the key. If people don't know what to do, how can they possibly protect themselves? And how can they possibly obey the law if they can't even tell what the law is? Because it's being made up every day with no foundation at all. So this is a very difficult time because the stability, I'll call it the quasi-stability of the old immigration system is completely gone. And now we're starting all over with new rules, court decisions that say he can't be punished for anything he does in office. He has no incentive to obey the law. And so he's resorted to making it up as he goes along. Now, let's see, covered the TPS. Then there's the H-1B visa cap that's coming up. H-1B is the most common non-immigrant work visa that there is. And he's turned that upside down as well. This year, it will open on March 7th to file your initial registration for an H-1B visa. And that was, and it'll be open from March 7th to March 24th. There are 85,000 H-1 visas available, but by changing the definitions and requiring this extreme vetting, people who apply will have a very difficult time getting through the vetting because they won't be allowed to get their H-1s, even if they're picked, if the vetting has not been completed. He has not defined what vetting means. There is a system for vetting, and the State Department runs it, and it's pretty effective. Not to say it shouldn't be improved, but I'm just saying there already is one that works. Right. So coming up with this whole new system of vetting without defining anything about what it means or what's the mechanism going to be for the vetting, it leaves people exactly where he wants them to be, unable to protect themselves, unable to even obey the law, because every day he changes the law anytime he feels like it. And that's a huge change. It used to be for 99% of anything you wanted to do, you'd have to go back to Congress and get a change in the immigration law, or at least properly amend the federal regulations following the rules of the Administrative Procedure Act before they would go into effect. He's skipping all of that. He's just decided this is what I'm going to do today, and that's all there is to it. And he's daring people to try to stop him. So it's a dark time for immigration law, to say the least.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that just really poignant opening and really explaining those executive orders and letting people know kind of what they should be looking out for. Mm-hmm. Our next question is, we get a lot of questions about compliance and legal compliance. What should immigrants and their families do to ensure that they're following the new regulations and policies?
Well, that's a difficult thing to answer. There are many organizations that are publishing regularly now guides and explanations of the changes in the law. Um, for example, if you're a Spanish speaker, Catholic Charities might be a good place to look because the overwhelming majority of their constituents are Spanish speakers. Um, there's the American Immigration Lawyers Association. It doesn't cost any money to log onto their website, and you can see what's happening in immigration news. There are other organizations that are publishing Know Your Rights documents. I have one on my desk is Know Your Rights if ICE visits your home. There's many of these out there that are published by various organizations who have been helping immigrants for years and years. And they're all stepping up to the plate. And so there's lots of Know Your Rights stuff out there as well. Another free source would be the American Civil Liberties Union. They have a bunch of stuff on their website about the changes in the law. The other place you might want to go is to the USCIS website. And the reason you go there is because they do publish their interpretation of whatever rule or changes come down the road. And you can rely on what they say, at least for the moment when it was said. That doesn't mean by the time you read about it that it's still going to be there. So you really need to be careful with the media. A lot of TV stations get their audience by scaring people. And so they exaggerate what's going on to get more viewers. You might want to stay away from sources like that where they get some benefit out of providing the information and go to true public service organizations. And there's hundreds of them around the United States. Where you live, you could Google in immigration help, for example, and the nonprofits will all come up. Most of the nonprofits have web pages with lots of information on it. But it's very hard to tell you what to do because they change every day. So that being the case, you have to go back. You should go back repeatedly to whatever source you're going to for information so that you're kept up to date. And that's the only way you could be able to protect yourself, because things are going to keep changing and changing and changing, because that's the method he wants to use to destabilize the entire immigration system. And you should make no mistake about it. He wants to end all legal immigration except to the people he wants. And he's doing everything he can to bring it down, to collapse the immigration structure, to collapse on itself. But he can't go to Congress because they won't do what he wants. So for a while here, it looks like we're going to be ruled by decree. And I don't know what will happen once it gets into the courts. There are some judges, federal judges, who will not resign in spite of what he says. And the federal court judges are the ones he's really going to go after, because for one thing, there were several federal court judges that, in his view, treated him very badly while they were busy convicting him of all the felonies.
Right.
And so he's trying to get people that helped him in one group, and everybody else is the enemy. And of course, immigrants didn't help him; they don't vote.
Right.
They become Elon Musk. So that's how I would keep up if I didn't have any knowledge about any of it. And also, there are community organizations in churches all around, and I'm sure in mosques and in synagogues all around the country, where they're putting on programs about the changes in the immigration laws. So there is information out there, and it is for free, and much of it is very good. You just need to know how to find it.
Agreed. Thank you so much.
Sure.
To our amazing audience, thank you for joining in. If you're just tuning in from any social media platform, we're excited to have Attorney Lawit, an experienced immigration attorney who has greatly contributed to today's topic. This is immigration.com, a platform designed to simplify the immigration process. Ask your immigration questions for free in any language and get connected with a verified attorney who can offer you legal assistance. You may also receive a free, confidential initial consultation. Visit www.immigrationquestion.com and sign up today. Again, that's www.immigrationquestionsingular.com today. Very quickly, Attorney Lawit, for a platform that seeks to aid the immigration journey of every immigrant, both documented and undocumented, by connecting them with seasoned attorneys like yourself, what do you think of immigration.question.com and what we do for the immigrant community?
Well, At this particular time in U.S. history, organizations like Immigration Question are critical because you are a source of truthful information and you bring in experts to help educate the public about what's going on and giving them resources when possible and telling them when it's not going to work anymore. So organizations like yours are absolutely critical to getting the word out there. And really, the, the biggest problem with all of these changes is no time to prepare. They go into effect the minute they leave his mouth, and he doesn't publish regulations or anything else. He's just winging it. And that's really, really undermining the whole entire immigration system. So organizations like yours are absolutely critical.
Definitely. Agreed. Also with attorneys like you. Awesome. Before we jump into the live Q&A session, I have one last question for you. As someone with decades of experience, what advice would you give? Three key pieces of advice that you would give for anyone going through this immigration journey right now who feels overwhelmed by these changes. What advice would you give them to make them feel more settled?
Well, the first thing is if you can apply for an immigration benefit, that is, if, for example, you have a qualifying relative or something like that, don't put it off. You must apply. Because if you don't apply and the immigration police come for you, there's very little you can do to talk them out of sending you out of the country. However, in many circumstances, if you're in the middle of an immigration process and that the process is going to result in you leaving the country to get a visa anyway, there's a long history of ICE and CBP leaving you alone because you're going to leave anyway. So what's the point of putting you through a removal hearing? So that's number one. If you can get legal, get legal. Don't put it off. My phones are ringing off the hook with people that I spoke to years ago. And I told them that this day would come because you could see it on the horizon. And they paid no attention whatsoever. And now they don't know if they can even apply. So if you can apply, do apply. The other thing you can do is make sure whatever status you have is current. Don't let anything expire. If you cannot even go one day out of status, because if you do that, you have to basically beg DHS to forgive your mistake and let you back into status. And they're not going to be doing that very much. So that's the second thing I would say. And I guess the third thing I would say is don't panic. This too shall pass. There have been terrible, terrible parts of U.S. immigration history since the founding of the country. There have been very good parts too. But I mean, there's been lots of terrible parts and they all come to an end. And in the end, the U.S. Has to accept the fact that they live in a world full of people of all different races and education levels and wealth levels. And so it's very, very important that all those folks, like the folks who are students, stay on top of things because there's no way out of removal if you're wealthy. You can't say I'm Elon Musk, so let me out. It doesn't work in immigration court. So those are the three main things that I would say right now people could be doing.
Thank you so very much. This has been such an exciting conversation. To our audience, our floor is now open for our live Q&A session. Feel free to type your question in the box and we'll hopefully get to it. Our first question is from Peter. I have a valid visa, but I want to travel outside of America soon. Can I face problems re-entering because of the new policies?
At this point, I would say the answer is yes, you can, because there are no policies. I don't know what country you're from, but if tomorrow Trump decides he doesn't like your country, then he can shut off all immigration in an instant. I do have clients that go out of the country all the time and they come back, but we're very clear before they go out that they must get a visa stamp on their passport that's current. They need to make sure that everything on that visa stamp is correct. They need to carry approval notices with them. In fact, they even need to carry entire applications with them in case they're questioned at the port of entry about their eligibility to enter the country. And that's another thing. If you are from another country and you are here legally, you need to carry proof of your legal status at all times. Now, I don't mean carry your passport at all times. That's too valuable. But photocopies of your entire passport that show visa stamps where you entered the United States and visa stamps put in by the consulate are very, very important. And so you always must carry proof. For example, there are some people who are U.S. citizens, but to look at them, you might not think they're U.S. citizens. Those folks can get citizenship ID cards, and they're like a credit card, and they can carry them with them, and that's absolute proof that they're a U.S. citizen. So depending on your visa status, depending on whether you need to get a visa stamp, and to some degree whether you're willing to gamble on Donald Trump, going out can be a very difficult process, or I should say going out won't be a difficult process. Coming back in could be a very difficult process if your papers are not in order. And so that's what people have to do if they want to travel safely.
Understood. The next question's from Sarai. I applied for a visitor visa many months ago, but I have not gotten a response. Is there a delay because of the new executive orders?
There certainly could be. When he talks about extreme vetting, those are code words telling the State Department to go even slower in your review of people's credentials, so to speak. As far as you're not getting a response from the consulate, they all have emails, and you can email the consulate and say exactly what you said right here. I applied, 7 months ago, and I never got any response. When will I have my appointment scheduled? And they'll usually respond by saying, well, your case is in administrative processing. Those are code words for vetting. And if your application goes into administrative processing, there is no telling when it will come out. They will not tell you anything about the process. They will not tell you what they're doing or how they're doing it. And you just have to wait for your application to resurface. But I can't say that's happening because you got to contact the consulate. Generally speaking, they will give you an update, even if it's only a few words, about why your case hasn't moved forward. The only other thing I can say is some of the consulates are now publishing the wait times. They're called visa wait times. And if you go to a consulate where if you want a tourist visa, you have to wait 400 days to get your appointment, that's very different from another country where you have to wait a week and a half and you get your appointment. So a lot depends on where you're applying for the visa as to how long it might take and how much information you'll be able to get. But they are a secret. The State Department is a secret organization. It always has been, and the courts have almost universally held that no person who applies for a visa has any right whatsoever to ask any question about the process from the State Department.
Wow.
And that's not new. It's been that way for some time. It's just that is going to be used as a way to keep more people out.
Understood. And one more question we have here from Selma. I want to invite my parents to visit me on a tourist visa, but I've heard about new travel restrictions. Will there be any problem since I am a U.S. citizen?
Well, because you're a U.S. citizen, your parents are more likely to get the visitor's visa to come see you because you permanently live in the United States. There are travel restrictions, but there's not outright bans at this point. So your parents should go to the consulate and apply for a tourist visa. You should write them a letter of invitation they can show to the consular officer. You should execute an affidavit of support to show they won't have to work in the United States. And then they can go to the consulate and they have documents to show them there. The one thing you would have to be careful of in this circumstance is if you're intending to immigrate, you're not entitled to a tourist visa. And so you being a U.S. citizen, they know you can petition for your parents the day after they land in the United States. So they may want to examine more closely what ties your parents have to the home country, because that's how they evaluate whether you're likely to come back or whether you're likely to stay. If your parents have had tourist visas in the past and they came back on time, that's a very positive factor, leans towards issuing another tourist visa. But thus far, I would say go for it and bring them in, because I don't think there'll be a problem if they get a visa after the president was elected.
Got it. Oh, I believe one more popped up. I will be applying for American citizenship very soon. Do you know of any changes to the naturalization process because of the new orders?
Well, one of the orders is that he's going to vet all citizen applicants much more heavily than they already do. So that means the FBI check's not enough, the Interpol check's not enough, and all the resources of the federal government are not enough. And so this will result in long delays. These days, from what I can see around the country and talking to all my clients, it takes about a year to become a citizen if you file for naturalization. But I remember the bad old days when it took 3.5 years to even get an interview for naturalization. And that was without a program to make the life more difficult. They just didn't know how to set the program up right. But that's what we're going to go back to, because citizens vote, and he only wants certain people to become citizens. And so therefore, if you're not one of those groups, you can expect long waits. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. That's such a way to wrap up today's session. Thank you for joining us, and special thanks to our guest speaker, Attorney John Lawit. Thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to having you again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We hope that today's webinar helped answer so many of your questions. Visit immigrationquestion.com to connect with experienced immigration attorneys like the one we had on today, who can guide you through your journey. If you've missed any part of today's session or want to listen again, the recording will be available on Spotify. To catch today's episode and past ones, just search for Borderless Talk with immigrationquestion.com. Join us next week for another great information session. You won't want to miss it. Once again, thank you, Attorney Lawit, and it was great having you on today. Can't wait to